Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the man who twice escaped from Mexican prisons, will now spend the rest of his life behind bars outside high security as she, the mother of their twin daughters, left looking down. After conviction, Chapo was sent here for life, the airtight Supermax prison in Colorado. July 19, 2019, El Chapo entered his 75-square-foot cell in Florence, Colorado, bringing a halt to his reign as the most wanted Mexican drug lord in America. This moment not only marked the end of the road for El Chapo, but also the beginning of his life in this miniature version of hell. Caption: he said this was the most inhumane conditions I've ever experienced. I suffer from headaches every day. I haven't seen the sun or breathed fresh air since I set foot in this country. I'm tortured for 24 hours every day. That was part of a letter written by El Chapo to a judge, recounting his harrowing experiences in the United States' toughest prison. It's evident he's not having the time of his life over there, but I assure you the real intrigue lies in the secretive administrative measures he's compelled to follow. Those the media conveniently avoid talking about. But before we get into details of these measures and El Chapo's doomed fate to die behind bars, I need you to first understand why he's being subjected to torture in a foreign land. The name Joaquin El Chapo Guzman hardly needs any introduction. Back in the 90s, El Chapo was one of the greatest drug lords of all time, after Pablo Escobar, of course. These two infamous drug lords dominated the narcotics trade in different eras. Escobar was a more charismatic kingpin who didn't shy away from the media, but El Chapo was a bit more cunning, operating in the shadows. In Mexico, his cartel empire raked in $3 billion annually. He co-founded the infamous Guadalajara cartel. However, after the death of DEA agent Enrique Camarena Salazar by Mexican sicarios, El Chapo exploited the chaos to ascend in rank within the cartel. That prompted Felix Gallardo, during a summit of all top drug lords in Mexico at that time, to appoint El Chapo and Ismael El Mayo Zambada as the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel. However, down the line, he orchestrated two of the most mind-blowing prison escapes of the 21st century. To escape means overcoming layer after layer of impenetrable walls and an army of guards that outnumber the inmates almost 2 to 1. The first escape is a scene out of a fictional movie, but when it comes to this man, anything's possible. January 19th, 2001. El Chapo escaped one of the most secure prisons in Mexico. The crazy part is, he accomplished that with the help of prison guards and workers. One of the guards was a guy named Francisco El Chito Gamberos Rivera, and with the help of his wife Emma Coronel Espuro, El Chapo had the prison escape all planned out. And when the hour came for him to leave prison, El Chito electronically opened his cell door, concealing him inside this laundry cart filled with dirty clothes, and began wheeling him through different doors out into the corridor. But hey, if you remember, it was a max security prison and not a 100-meter corridor, so how was it so easy? Well, wheeling him through the many security checkpoints was obviously scary, even for a guy like El Chapo. And to put that into context, at one point, El Chito was trying to convince a security guard to allow him through the gate. But in the process, the laundry cart started rolling back. You can imagine how Chapo was terrified that it would spill over and send him right back into the cell. But Mother Nature was on his side that day because the cart stopped, and El Chito was able to wheel him out into the parking lot, where he was transported out of town by car. Evidently, El Chapo wasn't the pioneer of prison escapes, and even though he was already wanted in the US, there was a slim chance of getting him extradited. 6:40 a.m. February 22nd, 2014, Mexican authorities arrested Guzman at a beachfront hotel in Mazatlan following an operation by the Mexican Navy with joint intelligence from DEA and the U.S. Marshal Service. The operation leading to his capture began at 3:45 a.m., when 10 pickup trucks of the Mexican Navy carrying over 65 Marines made their way to the resort. Mexican and U.S. federal agents had intel that the drug lord had been at the location for at least 2 days, and he had a condo on the 4th floor, in room 401. When Mexican authorities arrived at the location, they quickly subdued Carlos Manuel Ramirez, one of Guzman's bodyguards, before quietly making their way to the 4th floor by elevators and stairs. Once they were at Guzman's front door, they broke in and stormed 2 rooms, and one was Guzman lying in bed with his wife. He was charged with drug trafficking, as he couldn't be charged with other crimes more than once. Subsequently, he was sent to Federal Social Rehabilitation Center, where Joaquin El Chapo Guzman orchestrated a second prison escape that completely ridiculed the Mexican government, mocking its prison structure. This is the moment Joaquin El Chapo Guzman makes the Mexican government look ridiculous. 8:52 p.m., July 11, 2015. El Chapo was seen in the shower area of his cell as captured by security cameras. Now, the shower area in this cell was the only blind spot, and after the guards didn't see him for 25 minutes on those cameras, personnel went looking for him. When they got to his cell, Guzman was gone. Keep in mind that this was one of the top max security prisons in Mexico. Yet, El Chapo was able to orchestrate a second escape using a tunnel leading from the showers to a residential construction site a mile away. The tunnel was 33 feet deep underground, and Guzman descended down with a ladder. Down there, we had artificial light, air ducts, and high-quality construction materials. In addition, they found a motorcycle down there, which authorities believed was used to transport materials, and possibly Guzman himself. Now, even though El Chapo had a ton of help from the outside to facilitate this escape, it became evident that he had unparalleled access to resources and manpower, readily available to aid him in any situation. And after these 2 escapes, it looked like Mexico was highly incapable of holding the notorious drug lord, giving room for the U.S. to step in. 8:80 p.m., Florence, January 8, 2016. The residence of El Chapo was raided by 17 Marines from the Mexican Army and federal police. This specific home had been under surveillance for over a month after locals reported sighting armed people moving in and out. Monitored communications indicated the home was being prepared for the arrival of grandma or aunt, which authorities suspected was code for a high-priority potential target, El Chapo. But before they could get through this reinforced steel bulletproof door, El Chapo had already escaped through a secret tunnel emerging 1.5 kilometers away. Once he reached the other end of the tunnel, he came out and stole a civilian car at gunpoint. This statewide alert was issued for the stolen vehicle, and the federal police found and got it about 20 kilometers south of Los Mochis, near the town of Juan Jose Rios. At the point of arrest, El Chapo made one last desperate attempt to bribe the officers. With some cash, properties, maybe a job, but it was game over for Guzman. He was extradited straight to the U.S., being a wanted man in Chicago, San Diego, New York City, New Hampshire, Miami, and Texas. In addition to having indictments in at least 7 different U.S. federal courts. A critical requirement for the extradition was the U.S. guaranteed they wouldn't sentence Guzman to death if he were found guilty of homicide charges. But for El Chapo, getting the death penalty certainly would have been a much better verdict. January 19th, 2017. El Chapo was extradited to the U.S. and turned over to the DEA. From the second he stepped on American soil, you could see the terror in his eyes. He knew without a doubt that this may have been the end of the road for him. He was found guilty of all charges and sentenced on July 17, 2019 to life in prison, plus 30 to be served at ADX Florence. It means you're in your cell for 23 to 24 hours a day by yourself. You're let out for an hour in an underground concrete pit, where you can't see into the distance. Now, the ADX Florence houses some of the most ruthless criminals of our time. These guys are straight-up monsters. With no interest in money or power, all they want to see are people suffer in the most sadistic of ways. Now, in case you didn't know, you might be asking, why was El Chapo sent to this prison facility out of all the max prisons in the U.S.? Well, the answer to that can be found in the backstory of why ADX was initially created and the kind of inhumane treatment prisoners as sinister as El Chapo are subjected to endure. October 22, 1983. Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, members of the Aryan Brotherhood, fatally stabbed correctional officers Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman at a U.S. penitentiary in Marion. Now Thomas was walking down the hall with his hands cuffed in front of him. Then in what seemed like a scene out of The Matrix, he shoved his hands into his friend's cell, who unlocked his cuffs with a stolen key and handed a knife over, allowing Thomas to just kill that guard. A few hours later, a similar scenario occurred, with Clayton using the same tactic. Understand that back then, the U.S. Penitentiary in Marion used to be the go-to center for the worst criminals in the U.S. However, when these incidents occurred, it became clear that even among the most dangerous criminals, a few needed a more intense and secure facility. And that was how the idea of ADX came into play. ADX was all about housing people with no regard for human life. This thing's on a 37-acre complex in Florence, Colorado, part of a federal correctional complex, which has 3 correctional facilities, each with a different security rating. Now, the majority of the facility is above ground level, which is designed to house a max of 460 inmates. For some reason, it's never reached its full capacity. As of November 2023, ADX houses 332 inmates in 6 different units. Every inmate has been sent there for demonstrating signs of being too dangerous to be held in a normal prison. And like El Chapo, these people are confined in a single-person cell for 23 hours a day. And when they're allowed to leave their cell, they're only allowed to be in a slightly bigger area for just an hour. It could be anywhere between 1 a.m., 4 p.m., or any time chosen by the correctional officers. During their 1-hour free time, they're taken around in handcuffs, shackles, or both, depending on how dangerous the inmate is. For El Chapo, he's constantly in both, because he can't risk losing sight of him even for a second. Now inmates are free to move around, exercise, or even meditate in an underground pit looking like an empty pool. And yeah, the pool is larger than their cell, but it's way smaller than you think. How small, you ask? About 10 steps in a straight line or 30 in a circle. That should give you a clear picture of this so-called outdoor area. However, not all inmates face these strict measures. The longer a person's there and the longer they demonstrate good behavior, the more outdoor time they get. However, if an inmate proves to be incorrigible, they may spend their entire sentence locked up in ADX. Nevertheless, when it comes to diet and feeding, things get worse. Food and packs are served to inmates and are properly checked to ensure that they can't be used to harm themselves or correctional officers, and also to make sure their cells are kept clean. Inmates brought in from other places are allowed to eat in a shared dining room, but inmates as dangerous as El Chapo get their meals delivered by correctional officers. Once El Chapo's done eating, that food tray is inspected to make sure he didn't break off a piece to use as a weapon. Now his cell has a bed, a desk, and a stool, all constructed purely out of concrete. Then right there beside the door is a toilet. This toilet is designed for one flush at a time, meaning there aren't any handles there. His cell is one of a few that have a shower within it, and the shower is on a scheduled timer. There's a little sink in there as well, without a potentially dangerous tap. Some cells have steel mirrors that have been bolted to the walls, and others have televisions. El Chapo's in particular has a nice 13-inch TV. However, the programs are monitored. He can only really watch recreational, educational, and religious content. He's also given some books and magazines if he wishes to read, but I highly doubt there's any reading going on in there. Now, the next thing to consider is the wall of the cell. Unlike other places, the ADX has only a 4x4-inch foot window. The windows are designed to restrict inmates from knowing their particular location within the complex. So for an inmate like Chapo, it's nearly impossible for him to orchestrate some type of escape when he or people on the outside really don't have a clue about his exact location. Now outside of the cell is a multitude of motion detectors, cameras, and 1,400 remote-controlled steel doors. The guards in the control center watch over inmates 24 hours a day. They also have what's known as a panic button, which is basically the single red button that immediately shuts down every door in the place. In addition to that, there's pressure pads and 12-foot razor-wired fences surrounding the perimeter patrolled by heavily armed officers. And if you manage to sneak by all of that, there are 12 different gun towers ready down the road leading to ADX Florence. I mean, at this point, the thought of escaping should be terrifying. How many men would he have to pay off? Or how many security guards would he have to bypass to just exit this place? But as hardcore as all that sounds, there are a few more things that make this place even more horrible. We don't ask them to come here. With their misbehavior and management problems, they earn their way here. ADX Florence has inmates on 6 different security levels. One of the levels is the general population unit, and under that one is a cell block simply known as H. That's the unit where our dear old El Chapo is kept. They're watching him all the time, and according to his lawyers, he doesn't get any sleep. He gets harassed by these officers, and his family isn't allowed to visit. But as high-profile a criminal as El Chapo is, he's not the most dangerous person in here. There's a unit known as Range 13. That place is for those who need the toughest control and for creatures who are classified as ruthless killing animals. It's crazy how El Chapo's not down there, like somebody else you might know. Ramzi Youssef. Pakistani-born Ramzi Youssef was convicted in 1994 of terrorism, conspiracy, and other charges in connection for the '93 World Trade Center bombing, killing 6 people and injuring more than 1,000. In '96, Youssef was also convicted of planning Project Bajinka, a foiled plot conceived by senior Al-Qaeda member Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to bomb 12 planes in 48 hours. Now El Chapo has done a lot of things, but some might argue that Ramzi's crimes truly earned him a spot in Range 13. Another inmate of this hell is Thomas Silverstein, one of the 2 men behind the Federal Bureau of Prisons' idea to build the ADX Florence. At this point, one thing's certain. There's absolutely no way El Chapo can come up with a plan to escape the ADX. However, there is a small little loophole he could exploit to get back his freedom. The loophole, January 2022. El Chapo's conviction was upheld by a Second Circuit court in the U.S. after attorneys tried hinging a story of juror misconduct reported 8 days after his 2019 conviction. Now there's a story alleging that the jurors were exposed to information that wasn't admitted as evidence in the trial, including claims by a cooperating witness that El Chapo drugged and raped girls. This gave El Chapo's defense team an edge to taint the jury and claim that his conviction should have ended in a mistrial or the verdict overturned. The court wasn't buying this fabricated story and upheld his conviction. However, in a desperate attempt to get El Chapo out of this place, they came up with a new strategy, which is for El Chapo to be on his best behavior. 2 units within the ADX allow inmates to walk freely, interacting with others in their range. This unit, however, is only open to inmates who have demonstrated good behavior over a certain period of time. And if they continue displaying this good behavior, then there's a really high chance they can get transferred out of ADX to a lesser prison in the US. So if El Chapo somehow manages to make it out into a lesser prison, then he might be able to pull off one of his classical prison escapes. Another way to get out of ADX is by exploiting the law and criticisms about mental health issues. Despite the strict measures put in place so far to keep anyone from getting out of ADX, many murders have occurred within this place due to mental breakdowns. April 21, 2005. 2 inmates, Sylvester Rivera and Richard Santiago, were caught on tape brutally beating and stomping to death a high-profile Mexican mafioso, Manuel Torres, within the prison facility. Now just imagine criminals in ADX still committing murder. The next logical step was for them to be sentenced to death and placed on death row. But for some unknown reason, they remained incarcerated at ADX. Apart from this incident, there have been a total of 8 suicides inside this place, and that rests on the fact that the conditions at ADX Florence are too harsh on its inmates. I mean, they're criminals, but they're still humans, right? And besides, there are a few inmates who haven't committed crimes as brutal as El Chapo or Ramzi Newsom. In 2012, 11 inmates filed a federal class action suit against the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The suit alleged chronic abuse and failure to properly diagnose prisoners who are suffering from chronic mental illness. Also in 2020, a British magistrate refused to extradite Julian Assange, the founder of the non-profit organization, to the United States, and that was because the magistrate felt he would be subjected to solitary confinement and special administrative measures at ADX Florence. Luckily for Assange, the US and the High Court of Justice for England agreed to extradite him on the premise that he wouldn't be subjected to any special administrative measures or imprisoned at ADX. And yes, convincing a competent judge that El Chapo should be transferred to a lesser prison on grounds of good behavior is a long shot, but it's more or less like his only hope at this point. This can be coupled with the fact that his incarceration barely changed anything back in Mexico. The Sinaloa cartel remains one of the most powerful and prolific drug trafficking organizations. It still controls a worldwide web of contacts, moving Colombian cocaine and Mexican cooks to the US, also controlling seaports to get drugs and precursor chemicals shipped in from around the globe, while managing the multi-million-dollar tunnels built by El Chapo to smuggle tons of marijuana and cocaine. And that doesn't even emphasize the armies of hitmen and enforcers who are directly involved in extortion, kidnapping, and money laundering for the cartel.